Maria Elena wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carefully measured the milk into small plastic bags. The morning sun was already burning hot through the tiny window of the corner shop where she worked. At 15 years old, she had been helping her elderly employer, Mrs. Rodriguez, for almost 2 years now. Every peso she earned went straight to her grandmother, who raised her in their small wooden house on the outskirts of the city. The shop was busy that Tuesday morning. Workers stopped by for their morning coffee and bread before heading to the factories nearby. Maria Elena moved quickly between customers, counting change and wrapping items with practiced hands. Her stomach rumbled loudly, reminding her that she had only eaten a small piece of bread the night before. Her grandmother's pension was barely enough to cover their rent, and food was often scarce. As she poured milk from a large container into smaller bags for sale, a few drops splashed onto the counter. Without thinking, Maria Elena quickly wiped it up with her finger and tasted it. The creamy sweetness was like heaven in her mouth. She had not tasted fresh milk in months. At home, they could only afford powdered milk mixed with lots of water, and even that was a luxury they rarely enjoyed. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared suddenly from the back room, her sharp eyes immediately noticing what had happened. The older woman's face turned red with anger. She had been watching Maria Elena for weeks, suspicious that the girl might be stealing from her. This was exactly the proof she had been looking for. "I saw what you did," Mrs. Rodriguez shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Maria Elena. "You think I don't notice when you steal from me? That milk costs money, and every drop you take is money stolen from my pocket." Maria Elena's heart sank. She tried to explain that it was just a few drops that had spilled accidentally, but Mrs. Rodriguez would not listen. The woman had always been strict, but Maria Elena had never seen her this angry before. Other customers in the shop stopped their conversations and stared at the scene unfolding before them. "Please, Mrs. Rodriguez," Maria Elena pleaded, her voice shaking. "I wasn't stealing. It was just a small amount that spilled. I was hungry and I cleaned it up quickly. I would never take anything that doesn't belong to me." But her words fell on deaf ears. Mrs. Rodriguez had made up her mind. She accused Maria Elena of being dishonest and untrustworthy. The punishment she decided on was harsh and humiliating. Maria Elena would have to work for 2 weeks without any pay to make up for the stolen milk. Additionally, she would have to clean the entire shop every morning before opening, including scrubbing the floors and washing all the windows. The unfairness of the punishment brought tears to Maria Elena's eyes, but she knew she had no choice but to accept it. Her family desperately needed this job, and finding another one would be nearly impossible for someone her age with no formal education. She nodded silently, accepting the harsh terms while her heart broke inside. Word of Maria Elena's punishment spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some people felt sorry for her, knowing how hard she worked and how much her family struggled. Others whispered that she must have done something wrong to deserve such treatment. The shame and embarrassment followed her everywhere she went. Her grandmother was devastated when Maria Elena explained what had happened. The older woman's health was failing, and they had been counting on Maria Elena's wages to buy her medicine. Now they would have to find another way to survive for the next 2 weeks with no income at all. Despite the unfair treatment, Maria Elena continued to work at the shop with dignity and determination. She arrived early every morning to complete her cleaning duties and worked late into the evening serving customers. Her hands became rough and cracked from all the scrubbing, but she never complained or showed any signs of bitterness toward Mrs. Rodriguez. The other shop owners in the area began to notice Maria Elena's character during this difficult time. They saw how she handled the situation with grace and continued to work hard despite being treated poorly. Some of them started to offer her small jobs on the side, impressed by her work ethic and honest nature. One evening, as Maria Elena was closing up the shop, she overheard Mrs. Rodriguez talking to her friend about hiring a new girl to replace her. The older woman had decided that Maria Elena was too much trouble and planned to let her go as soon as she found someone else. This news hit Maria Elena like a punch to the stomach, but she remained silent and continued her work. That night, Maria Elena walked home slowly through the dimly lit streets, wondering what she and her grandmother would do if she lost this job. The future seemed darker than ever, and she felt completely alone in her struggle. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined, and that someone was watching her story unfold with growing interest and admiration. Carlos Mendoza stepped out of his black Mercedes and straightened his expensive suit jacket. At 55 years old, he was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the region, owning a chain of supermarkets and several real estate properties. Despite his success, Carlos had never forgotten his humble beginnings. He had grown up in poverty, much like the neighborhoods. He was now visiting as part of his company's community outreach program. His assistant had arranged for him to visit several small businesses in the area to discuss potential partnerships and investment opportunities. The company was looking to expand its network of suppliers, particularly focusing on supporting local entrepreneurs who showed promise and dedication. As Carlos walked down the busy street, he noticed the small corner shop where Maria Elena worked. Something about the place caught his attention, perhaps the steady stream of customers or the neat appearance despite its obviously limited resources. He decided to stop in and buy a bottle of water, curious to see how the business operated. When Carlos entered the shop, he immediately noticed the young girl behind the counter. Maria Elena was carefully organizing items on the shelves, making sure everything was perfectly arranged despite the early morning hour. Her movements were efficient and purposeful, and she greeted each customer with genuine politeness and respect. Carlos observed quietly as Maria Elena served several customers. He was impressed by her knowledge of the products, her ability to handle money accurately, and most importantly, her honest and transparent dealings with everyone who entered the shop. Even when customers made mistakes with their change, she politely corrected them and ensured they received exactly what they paid for. What struck Carlos most was the girl's demeanor. Despite her young age and simple clothes, she carried herself with dignity and professionalism. She seemed to take genuine pride in her work, treating each customer's needs as important regardless of how small their purchase might be. As Carlos waited for his turn, he overheard Mrs. Rodriguez speaking harshly to Maria Elena about some minor issue with the inventory. The older woman's tone was dismissive and cruel, treating the girl more like an unwelcome burden than a valued employee. Carlos noticed how Maria Elena accepted the criticism without argument, simply nodding and working harder to fix whatever problem had been identified. When it was finally Carlos's turn to be served, Maria Elena looked up at him with tired but respectful eyes. She noticed his expensive clothes and polite manner, but treated him exactly the same as she had treated the factory worker who had come in before him. Carlos asked for a bottle of water and some local newspapers, using the opportunity to engage her in brief conversation. "You seem to know this business very well," Carlos commented as Maria Elena efficiently gathered his items. "How long have you been working here?" "Almost 2 years, sir," Maria Elena replied politely. "Mrs. Rodriguez has taught me a lot about running a shop and serving customers properly." Carlos was struck by her loyalty, even though he had just witnessed how poorly her employer treated her. He paid for his items and left, but something about the encounter stayed with him throughout the day. There was something special about that young girl, a combination of character traits that reminded him of his own youth and the struggles he had faced. Over the next several days, Carlos found himself returning to the shop at different times, ostensibly to buy small items but really to observe Maria Elena and learn more about her situation. Each visit reinforced his initial impressions. The girl was honest, hardworking, and treated everyone with respect regardless of their social status or appearance. During one visit, Carlos witnessed Mrs. Rodriguez publicly humiliating Maria Elena over the milk incident. He watched as the young girl accepted her harsh punishment without protest, even though it was clearly unfair and excessive. The grace with which she handled the situation impressed him deeply, but it also made him angry to see such talent and character being wasted in such an environment. Carlos began making discreet inquiries about Maria Elena and her family situation. He learned about her grandmother's illness, their financial struggles, and how much the girl's small income meant to their survival. He also discovered that Maria Elena had been forced to leave school to work, giving up her education to help support her family. The more Carlos learned, the more convinced he became that this was exactly the kind of person his company should be supporting. Here was someone with natural business instincts, unquestionable integrity, and a work ethic that many of his employees could learn from. But she was trapped in a situation that would never allow her to develop her full potential. Carlos also learned about Mrs. Rodriguez's plans to fire Maria Elena. The older woman had been spreading rumors about the girl's supposed dishonesty, trying to justify her decision to let her go. This information made Carlos realize that time was running short if he wanted to help. That evening, Carlos sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind kept returning to Maria Elena. He had built his business empire through hard work and determination, but he had also been fortunate to receive help from mentors who believed in him when he was young. Now he was in a position to provide that same opportunity to someone else who deserved it. Carlos began to formulate a plan. He could not simply offer charity, as he sensed that Maria Elena was too proud to accept handouts. Instead, he would need to create a genuine opportunity that would allow her to earn her success through her own efforts. The challenge would be convincing her to trust him and take a chance on a completely different future. As he made his decision, Carlos felt a familiar excitement that reminded him of his early entrepreneurial days. Sometimes the best investments were not in buildings or inventory, but in people who had the character and determination to succeed if given the right opportunity. The following Wednesday morning started like any other for Maria Elena. She arrived at the shop early to complete her cleaning duties, her hands already aching from the previous day's work. The punishment period was nearly over, but she still had not received any pay, and her grandmother's condition was getting worse. They had been surviving on the kindness of neighbors who occasionally shared their meals. As Maria Elena swept the front of the shop, she noticed the same well-dressed man who had been coming by regularly over the past week. He always bought small items and was polite, but something about his repeated visits seemed different from their regular customers. Today, instead of just buying something and leaving, he approached her with a more serious expression. "Excuse me," Carlos said gently. "I wonder if I could speak with you for a moment when you have time. My name is Carlos Mendoza, and I have a business proposition that might interest you." Maria Elena looked up in surprise. She had never heard of anyone wanting to discuss business with her. She was just a shop girl with no education or experience beyond what she had learned working for Mrs. Rodriguez, but something in the man's sincere tone made her curious rather than suspicious. "I can speak now." "Sir," she replied, setting down her broom. "Mrs. Rodriguez is in the back room doing inventory, so the shop is quiet for a few minutes." Carlos chose his words carefully. He explained that he owned several businesses and was looking for someone with the right character and work ethic to help manage a new project. He had been observing her interactions with customers and was impressed by her honesty, efficiency, and professional attitude. "I have been watching how you work," Carlos continued, "and I believe you have natural abilities that could be developed into something much greater than what you are doing here. I would like to offer you an opportunity to learn business management and eventually run one of my smaller operations." Maria Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. She had never imagined that someone like Carlos Mendoza would even notice her, let alone offer her a chance to work for him. But along with the excitement came doubt and fear. She had no formal education, no experience with big businesses, and no idea if she was capable of learning what would be required. "Sir, I am honored that you would consider me," Maria Elena said carefully, "but I think you may have the wrong person. I only finished elementary school, and I have never worked anywhere except this small shop. I would not know how to manage a real business." Carlos smiled at her humility, which only confirmed his belief that she was the right person for the opportunity. "The most important qualities for business success cannot be taught in school," he explained. "Honesty, dedication, respect for customers, and the ability to work hard even when things are difficult. You have already demonstrated all of these qualities." He went on to explain that he would provide training and education as part of the opportunity. Maria Elena would start by learning basic business operations, accounting, and customer service in a more formal setting. If she proved successful, she would eventually have the chance to manage her own location and earn a percentage of the profits. The offer seemed too good to be true, and Maria Elena's practical nature made her cautious. She had heard stories of people who promised great opportunities but were actually trying to take advantage of desperate young people. But there was something about Carlos's manner that seemed genuine and trustworthy. "What about my grandmother?" Maria Elena asked, thinking of her primary responsibility. "She depends on me for everything, and I cannot leave her alone while I learn new work." Carlos had anticipated this concern. "Your grandmother's care would be part of our arrangement," he explained. The position includes housing for both of you, medical care for your grandmother, and a steady income that would be much more than what you earn here." Before Maria Elena could respond, Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from the back room and immediately noticed the well-dressed stranger talking to her employee. Her expression turned suspicious and hostile as she approached them. "What is going on here?" Mrs. Rodriguez demanded. "Maria Elena, you are supposed to be working, not chatting with customers about personal matters." Carlos turned to face Mrs. Rodriguez with calm authority. "I was just discussing a business opportunity with your employee," he said politely but firmly. "I am Carlos Mendoza, and I own several businesses in this region." The mention of his name caused Mrs. Rodriguez's attitude to change completely. She had heard of Carlos Mendoza and his successful companies. Suddenly her voice became sweet and respectful as she realized she was speaking to someone wealthy and influential. "Oh, Mr. Mendoza, what an honor to have you visit our humble shop," Mrs. Rodriguez gushed. "How can we serve you today? Perhaps you are interested in purchasing our business or forming some kind of partnership." Carlos's expression remained neutral, but Maria Elena could see a flash of distaste in his eyes at Mrs. Rodriguez's sudden change in behavior. "Actually," he said, "I am interested in offering Maria Elena a position with my company. I have been impressed by her work ethic and character." Mrs. Rodriguez's face went through several emotions quickly. First surprise, then anger, and finally a forced smile as she tried to process this unexpected development. She had been planning to fire Maria Elena, and now discovered that this girl she considered worthless had attracted the attention of a successful businessman. "Well, of course Maria Elena is a good worker," Mrs. Rodriguez said, trying to sound supportive while inwardly seething. "I have trained her myself, and she has learned everything she knows from working in my shop." Carlos looked at Mrs. Rodriguez with barely concealed disapproval. He had witnessed how poorly she treated Maria Elena, and was not impressed by her attempt to take credit for the girl's natural abilities. "I am sure Maria Elena appreciates everything she has learned here," he said diplomatically, "but I believe she is ready for new challenges and opportunities." The conversation that followed was tense, with Mrs. Rodriguez trying to convince Carlos that Maria Elena was not ready for such responsibility, while Carlos politely but firmly maintained his offer. Throughout the exchange, Maria Elena remained silent, overwhelmed by the surreal nature of having two adults discussing her future, as if her entire life was being decided in a few moments. Finally, Carlos turned back to Maria Elena. "The decision is entirely yours," he said. "Take some time to think about it and discuss it with your grandmother. Here's my business card with my phone number. If you are interested, call me tomorrow and we can arrange a time to discuss the details further." As Carlos left the shop, Maria Elena stood holding his business card, feeling as if her world had just been turned upside down. Mrs. Rodriguez watched him go with a mixture of anger and jealousy, already plotting how she might benefit from this unexpected connection to a wealthy businessman. That evening, Maria Elena walked home slowly, Carlos's business card clutched tightly in her hand. Her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. The opportunity seemed like a dream, but she had learned to be cautious about things that seemed too good to be true. Her grandmother had always taught her that if something sounds too wonderful, there is usually a catch hidden somewhere. When she arrived at their small house, her grandmother was sitting on the front steps, enjoying the cooler evening air. The older woman immediately noticed that something significant had happened. Maria Elena's expression was a mixture of excitement and confusion that she had never seen before. "Abuela," Maria Elena said, using the affectionate term for grandmother, "something incredible happened today, but I need your wisdom to help me understand if it is real or if I am being foolish." She sat down beside her grandmother and carefully explained everything that had occurred. She described Carlos Mendoza's visits to the shop, his offer of employment, and his promise to provide housing and medical care for both of them. Her grandmother listened quietly, asking occasional questions but mostly allowing Maria Elena to share all the details. When the story was complete, her grandmother was quiet for a long time, considering everything she had heard. She had lived through many difficulties and had developed good instincts about people and situations. Something about this opportunity felt different from the usual promises that wealthy people sometimes made to poor families. "Tell me about this man's character," her grandmother finally said. "Not what he promised, but how he behaved toward you and others." Did he treat you with respect? Did he seem honest in his manner? Maria Elena thought carefully before answering. She described how Carlos had observed her work for several days before approaching her, how he had spoken to her with genuine respect, and how his expression had shown disapproval when Mrs. Rodriguez treated her badly. She also mentioned that he had not pushed her for an immediate answer, but had given her time to consider the decision. Her grandmother nodded thoughtfully. "These are good signs," she said. "A dishonest person usually wants quick decisions and does not encourage you to think carefully. But we must still be very cautious. If this opportunity is real, it could change our lives completely. If it is not real, we could lose everything we have now." They spent the next hour discussing all the possible outcomes. Maria Elena's current situation was stable, but offered no hope for improvement. Her grandmother's health was declining, and they both knew that her small income would never be enough to provide proper medical care. On the other hand, accepting Carlos's offer meant leaving everything familiar and trusting their future to someone they barely knew. "What does your heart tell you about this man?" her grandmother asked finally. Maria Elena closed her eyes and thought about her interactions with Carlos. Despite her natural caution, something deep inside told her that he was sincere. There had been a quality in his voice and manner that reminded her of her late grandfather, who had been the most trustworthy person she had ever known. "I believe he is honest, Abuela," she said quietly, "but I'm afraid that I'm not capable of doing what he expects. What if I fail and disappoint him? What if I am not smart enough to learn business management?" Her grandmother took Maria Elena's hands in her own weathered ones. "Child, you have been managing our household finances since you were 12 years old. You have learned to operate that shop better than Mrs. Rodriguez herself. You treat every customer with respect and honesty, even when they are rude to you. These are the qualities that matter most in business." The old woman paused, looking directly into her granddaughter's eyes. "I have watched you grow into a young woman of character and strength. If this man has recognized these qualities in you, then perhaps it is time to trust in your own abilities." That night, Maria Elena lay awake thinking about the decision. She imagined what it would be like to work in a real business office, to learn about accounting and management, to have enough money to buy her grandmother proper medicine. The possibilities were exciting, but also terrifying. The next morning, Maria Elena arrived at the shop to find Mrs. Rodriguez in an unusually good mood. The older woman had spent the night thinking about Carlos Mendoza's visit and had developed her own plans for benefiting from the situation. "Maria Elena," Mrs. Rodriguez said with fake sweetness, "I have been thinking about yesterday's conversation with Mr. Mendoza. Perhaps I was too hasty in my judgment of your abilities. If such an important businessman sees potential in you, then maybe you deserve more responsibility here in my shop." Maria Elena was surprised by this sudden change in attitude. Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "I am prepared to offer you a raise and more responsibility. You could become my assistant manager, and eventually, you might even inherit this business when I retire." The irony of the situation was not lost on Maria Elena. For 2 years, Mrs. Rodriguez had treated her as barely more than a servant. Now, faced with the possibility of losing her to a better opportunity, the older woman was suddenly willing to recognize her value. "Thank you for the offer, Mrs. Rodriguez," Maria Elena replied diplomatically. "But I need to think about all my options carefully." Mrs. Rodriguez's expression darkened slightly. "You should be very careful about trusting strangers," she warned. "Rich men sometimes make promises to young girls that they have no intention of keeping. You could end up in a much worse situation than you are in now." Despite Mrs. Rodriguez's attempts to create doubt, Maria Elena had already made her decision. Her grandmother's words the night before had given her the confidence she needed. She would call Carlos Mendoza and accept his offer, trusting in her own abilities and his apparent sincerity. During her lunch break, Maria Elena walked to the public phone booth on the corner and dialed the number on Carlos's business card. Her hands trembled slightly as she waited for someone to answer. "Mr. Mendoza's office," said a professional voice on the other end. "Hello?" Maria Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is Maria Elena Rodriguez. Mr. Mendoza asked me to call him about a business opportunity. One moment, please, the voice replied. Within seconds, Carlos was on the line. Maria Elena, I am glad you called, he said warmly. Have you had time to consider my offer? Yes, sir, she replied. I would like to accept your offer if it is still available. Excellent, Carlos said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning? At 10 o'clock? We can discuss all the details and begin making arrangements for your transition. As Maria Elena hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made her heart race. She had just made the biggest decision of her life, one that would change everything for her and her grandmother. There was no turning back now. The next morning, Maria Elena put on her best dress, which was still simple and worn but clean and neat. She had never been inside a real office building before, and as she approached the tall glass structure where Carlos worked, she felt overwhelmed by its size and modern appearance. The lobby was filled with well-dressed people moving purposefully, and she wondered if she looked completely out of place. The receptionist was kind and professional, directing Maria Elena to the elevator that would take her to Carlos's office on the 10th floor. As the elevator rose, she watched the city spread out below through the glass walls, thinking about how different this world was from the small shop where she had spent the last 2 years. Carlos's office was spacious and comfortable, with large windows overlooking the city center. But what impressed Maria Elena most was how he greeted her. Despite his expensive suit and important position, he treated her with the same respect he would show to any business partner, offering her a comfortable chair and asking if she would like some coffee or water. Before we discuss the business details, Carlos began, I want you to understand exactly what I am offering and why. I did not choose you randomly or out of charity. I chose you because I believe you have the natural abilities to succeed in business, and I am willing to invest in developing those abilities. He explained that Maria Elena would start by working in his main office, learning the fundamentals of business operations. She would attend classes in basic accounting, customer service, and business management. After 6 months of training, she would take on increasing responsibilities, eventually managing one of his smaller retail locations. The salary during your training period will be 3 times what you currently earn, Carlos continued. And when you begin managing your own location, you will receive a percentage of the profits in addition to your base salary. If you are successful, you could eventually own your own franchise within my company. Maria Elena listened carefully, trying to absorb all the information. The financial aspects alone were almost unbelievable. 3 times her current salary would be more money than she had ever imagined having. But Carlos was offering something even more valuable than money. He was offering her a chance to build a real future. There is also the matter of housing and medical care, Carlos added. I own several apartment buildings, and there is a comfortable 2-bedroom unit available for you and your grandmother. The company's health insurance will cover all of your grandmother's medical needs, including the specialist care she requires. When Carlos finished explaining the offer, he slid a contract across the desk for Maria Elena to review. Take this home and read it carefully, he said. Have your grandmother look at it as well. If you have any questions or concerns, we can discuss them before you sign anything. Maria Elena looked at the thick document, knowing that she would need help understanding all the legal language. But the main points were clear, and they matched everything Carlos had promised. What impressed her most was that he was not pressuring her to sign immediately, but encouraging her to be careful and thorough in her decision. There is one more thing I want to show you, Carlos said, standing up from his desk. I think it would help you understand what kind of company this is and what your future could look like. He led Maria Elena through the office, introducing her to several employees and explaining their roles. She met the head of accounting, a woman who had started as a cashier and worked her way up through training and dedication. She met the manager of operations, a man who had begun as a stock clerk and now oversaw 12 retail locations. Every person in a leadership position here started at the bottom, Carlos explained as they walked. I believe in promoting from within and giving people opportunities to grow. Your background is not a disadvantage. It is actually an advantage because you understand what it means to work hard and serve customers honestly. The tour continued to the training center, where new employees learned company procedures and policies. Maria Elena saw people her own age studying business principles and practicing customer service skills. For the first time, she began to believe that she truly could learn what was needed to succeed in this environment. On the way back to Carlos's office, they stopped at the company's medical clinic. All employees and their families receive health care here, Carlos explained. We have a full-time nurse and visiting doctors who provide everything from routine checkups to specialized treatment. Maria Elena thought of her grandmother, who had not seen a doctor in over a year, because they could not afford it. The idea that her grandmother could receive proper medical care brought tears to her eyes. Back in his office, Carlos noticed her emotional response. I can see that you are taking this decision seriously, he said gently. That is exactly the kind of thoughtful approach that convinced me you are the right person for this opportunity. Before leaving, Maria Elena asked the question that had been worrying her most. Mr. Mendoza, what if I fail? What if I cannot learn what is required, or I make mistakes that hurt your business? Carlos smiled at her honesty. Everyone makes mistakes when they are learning, he replied. What matters is how you respond to those mistakes and what you learn from them. Based on what I have observed about your character, I believe you will approach challenges with integrity and determination. Those qualities are more important than avoiding all mistakes. He paused, looking directly at her. I have been in business for over 20 years, and I have learned to recognize potential when I see it. You have something that cannot be taught in school or bought with money. You have character, and that is the foundation of all real success. As Maria Elena prepared to leave, Carlos handed her his personal business card. Call me anytime if you have questions, he said. And remember, this opportunity exists because you have already proven yourself worthy of it. You just need to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you. Walking back through the city streets toward her grandmother's house, Maria Elena felt as if she was seeing everything with new eyes. The contract in her hands represented not just a job, but a completely different life for her and her grandmother. The scared, uncertain girl who had entered the office building that morning was gone, replaced by a young woman who was beginning to understand her own potential. That evening, as she and her grandmother carefully read through every page of the contract, Maria Elena realized that her life was about to change in ways she had never dared to dream. The punishment she had received for a spoon of milk had led to the greatest opportunity of her life, proving that sometimes the worst moments can become the doorway to the best future. 2 weeks later, Maria Elena stood in the doorway of her new apartment, hardly believing that this comfortable, clean space was now her home. The 2-bedroom unit had more space than she and her grandmother had ever enjoyed, with a modern kitchen, a living room with large windows, and even a small balcony overlooking a quiet courtyard. Her grandmother sat in a comfortable armchair, looking healthier than she had in years. The company doctor had already examined her and started her on new medications that were helping with her chronic pain and breathing problems. For the first time in months, the older woman was able to sleep through the night without coughing. I still cannot believe this is real, her grandmother said, looking around the bright living room. A month ago, we were wondering how we would buy food for the week. Now you have a real career, and I have better medical care than I have ever had in my life. Maria Elena smiled as she unpacked their few belongings. Most of what they owned fit easily into 2 small boxes, but Carlos had arranged for the apartment to come furnished with everything they needed. There were new clothes in the closet for both of them, a refrigerator stocked with food, and even some books for Maria Elena to study during her free time. The transition had not been without challenges. Maria Elena's first week at the company had been overwhelming, with so much new information to absorb. She struggled with some of the computer systems and felt intimidated by the formal business environment. But her colleagues were patient and supportive, and Carlos personally checked on her progress every few days. Learning is never easy, he had told her during one of their meetings, but I have noticed that you ask good questions and you are not afraid to admit when you do not understand something. Those are the qualities of someone who will succeed. Mrs. Rodriguez had not taken Maria Elena's departure well. When Maria Elena returned to the shop to give her final notice, the older woman had been angry and spiteful, accusing her of being ungrateful and predicting that she would fail in her new position. But Maria Elena had listened quietly and thanked Mrs. Rodriguez for the experience she had gained, refusing to respond to the harsh words with bitterness of her own. The contrast between her old life and her new one was remarkable. Instead of sweeping floors and measuring milk into plastic bags, Maria Elena now spent her days learning about inventory management, financial planning, and customer relations. She attended classes in the morning and worked alongside experienced managers in the afternoon, gradually building her knowledge and confidence. What surprised her most was discovering how much she enjoyed the intellectual challenges of business. She had a natural aptitude for understanding customer needs and finding efficient solutions to operational problems. Her instructors were impressed by her quick learning and her ability to apply new concepts to real situations. After 3 months in the training program, Carlos called Maria Elena into his office for a progress review. She was nervous, worried that she might not be meeting his expectations, but his expression was pleased and proud. "Your instructors tell me that you are one of the most dedicated students they have ever worked with," he began. "Your test scores are excellent, but more importantly, you understand the principles behind what you are learning. You are not just memorizing procedures. You are thinking like a business manager." Carlos explained that he was ready to accelerate her timeline. Instead of waiting 6 months to begin managing a location, he wanted her to start taking on real responsibilities immediately. She would begin as an assistant manager at one of his successful stores, working alongside an experienced manager who could continue her education in a practical setting. "The store I have in mind is similar to Mrs. Rodriguez's shop, but larger and more modern," Carlos continued. "I think your experience and understanding of that type of business will be valuable. Eventually, when you are ready, I would like you to consider opening a new location in the neighborhood where you grew up." The idea of returning to her old neighborhood as a successful business manager felt like completing a circle. Maria Elena thought of the other young people there who were facing the same struggles she had experienced, and she began to envision ways she could create opportunities for them as well. "I have one more surprise for you," Carlos said, opening his desk drawer and pulling out an official-looking document. "This is an enrollment form for evening business classes at the university. If you are interested, the company will pay for your education, and you can earn a formal business degree while you continue working." Maria Elena stared at the form, remembering how she had once believed that higher education was impossible for someone like her. Now she was being offered the chance to attend university while building her career at the same time. That evening, Maria Elena and her grandmother sat on their balcony, watching the sunset over the city. The older woman was knitting while Maria Elena studied her business textbooks, both of them enjoying the peaceful comfort of their new life. "Do you ever think about that day with the spoon of milk?" her grandmother asked quietly. Maria Elena looked up from her books and smiled. "Every day," she replied. "If Mrs. Rodriguez had not punished me so unfairly, Mr. Mendoza might never have noticed my character. The worst thing that happened to me became the best thing that ever happened to me." Her grandmother nodded wisely. "Sometimes life tests us in ways that seem cruel and unfair," she said. "But if we respond with dignity and keep working hard, those tests can become the foundation for something wonderful." As the months passed, Maria Elena excelled in her new role. She became known throughout the company for her innovative ideas, her dedication to customer service, and her ability to motivate and train other employees. Carlos watched her progress with the satisfaction of someone who had recognized potential and seen it fulfilled. Within 2 years, Maria Elena was managing her own store and earning more money than she had ever imagined possible. She used her success to help other young people from her neighborhood, creating internship programs and providing scholarships for those who wanted to continue their education. The scared, hungry girl who had once been punished for tasting a spoon of spilled milk had become a confident, successful businesswoman who was changing lives in her community. Her story became an inspiration to others, proving that character and determination can overcome any obstacle when combined with opportunity and hard work. And sometimes, late at night when she was reviewing her store's financial reports or planning new employee training programs, Maria Elena would remember that moment when Carlos Mendoza first walked into Mrs. Rodriguez's shop. She would smile, knowing that the best decisions in life often come from trusting in yourself and taking a chance on something that seems too good to be true, but feels exactly right in your heart.